His Excellency Dr. Didicus Drews, Director General of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, OECS. Dr. Prakash Prasad, President of the University of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Fitzgerald Providence, Director of Forestry, St. Vincent the Grenadines. Ms. Kiefer Jackson, Chief of Staff, the Partnership Initiative on Sustainable Land Management, staff of the OECS Commission, staff of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, our distinguished OECS students, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to today's presentation and awards ceremony. I am Ms. Lovely Anthony, Head of Communications at the OECS Commission and your Master of Ceremony for today. So students, why are we here this morning? While we are here to feature this strategic initiative via documentary, it is our hope that the information shared with you today will enlighten you as to the critical role that you will play in the sustainable management of our environment in the OECS. We are hoping that you'll be motivated to apply yourselves to your path of learning and become creative innovators and enforcers to protect our region. Now, the OECS Director General is a man who is very hard to schedule, and we are thankful that he could make himself available in person today to meet with you and visit the administration of your university. His presence here signals the importance of this investment that the OECS ILM project, through the support of the European Union, is making in the region to build capacity in the area of forestry management. Dr. Joes is an educator and a regional education expert, having served in 2 OECS countries as Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education, the Registrar of the Caribbean Examination Council, CXC, and on several regional and international boards and advisory committees for education, including the GPE, UNESCO, and the board of the Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator, an initiative established by Bill Gates and Sir Richard Branson. He is enthusiastic about this initiative, and without further ado, I now invite him to deliver his remarks.
Big ambitions are achieved through small but incisive steps, and today we take time to acknowledge and to celebrate this small step that we hope and anticipate will be a big leap for our capacity to take responsibility for integrated management of our environmental ecosystem. At the OECS Commission, our strategic goal number 4 is building resilience as the region is faced with the impacts of climate change, frequent natural disasters, biodiversity loss of our plants and animal species, degraded lands, poor soil and water quality, all of which is familiar to you. This initiative fits squarely within this remit. It was the American writer Mark Twain who famously said, "Buy land, you're not making any more." They're not making it anymore. But as small island states with very limited land mass, we can also say conserve our land because we can't replace it once we lose it. So why then is the OECS involved in this training? We are engaged because we have an obligation to fulfill treaty obligations towards regional integration economically, politically, and technically in the OECS region. In addition to the prescriptions of the revised Treaty of Basse-Terre, there are frameworks and declarations emanating from requests from member states. For example, in 1999, member states requested a framework for environmental management and a regional strategy that led to the 2001 St. George's Declaration of Principles for Environmental Sustainability in the OECS region. In the rapidly evolving arena of climate change, this declaration was revised in 2006 and in 2010, ultimately leading to the 2020 St. George's Declaration towards 2040. An essential component of what we call the SGD 2040 is capacity building to create an enabling environment in which member states and regional institutions can, 1, guide and support the process of sustainable development, and 2, set and achieve the individual and collective development goals. Training is continually embedded in the work of the OECS, specifically in the overall work programs and projects of our Environmental Sustainable Development Unit, So for example, this ILM project, its predecessor, the OECS Global Climate Change Alliance project, the Biospace project, and many other past and ongoing projects all encompass an element of training, extending in some cases to incorporating field and experiential internships. So why invest in building capacity in forestry and the environment? This brings us to the specific issue of why we need to do this investment. This is a question that the average citizen might legitimately ask in the face of so many competing essentialities. And there are 9 good reasons why we must do this. 1, global environmental change and policies are increasing the pressures of small islands. The IPCC reports confirm that human mortality is highly vulnerable regions was 15 times higher compared with low vulnerability areas. It reported, and I quote, substantial damage and increased irreversible losses in terrestrial, freshwater, xerispheric, coastal, and open ocean ecosystems, overshooting the infamous 1.5 degrees temperature, even, and I quote, temporarily, will lead to much more severe, oftentimes irreversible impacts from local species extinctions to the complete drowning of salt marshes to loss of human lives from increased heat stress. Second reason, the critical functions of forests are well established in research. These include providing environmental and ecosystem services, such as sustaining biodiversity, water conservation, providing timber and non-timber products and services, as well as providing livelihoods. Thirdly, global discourses to address many of the environmental challenges continue to emphasize and promote forestry relevance in terms of their functions and roles to stabilizing our environment. And there's a whole range of UN conventions, the Convention on Biodiversity, the Framework on Climate Change, etc. And there are other multilateral agreements such as the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, the World Heritage Convention, and so on. Special mention was being made of our own regional convention for the protection and development of the marine environment in the wider Caribbean region, the Cartagena Convention. This is a regional legal agreement for the protection of the Caribbean Sea, adopted in Colombia on 24th March 1983 and enforced from October 1986. It is supported by 3 technical agreements or protocols on oil spills, specially protected areas and wildlife, and land-based sources of marine pollution. The role of Caribbean forests and forestry in this context is self-evident and should not be overstated. The fourth reason is because recognition and implementation of these conventions is increasingly being activated or enforced by numerous legally and non-legally binding international decisions and collaborative partnerships. Most notable among them are the Bonn Challenge, the New York Declaration of Forests, the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Climate Agreement of 2015, the International Arrangement on Forests, the Collaborative Partnership on Forests, and the UN Forum on Forests. Now, I mean, all of this is a lot of techno-speak, frankly, but the reality is that without persons like yourself trained in the capacity to actually make that difference, this just becomes a lot of legal jargon and clutter on the international stage. The fifth reason, despite the global recognition, and you heard all the conventions, forests are still continuously threatened by deforestation for competing land uses for agriculture, housing, tourism, other commercial developments, by forest fires and invasive species. The Global Forest Resource Assessment in 2020 highlighted that the world's forest area continues to decrease, but at a slower rate during 1990 to 2020. Here in this region, there is a very limited understanding about the consequences arising from the decimation of forests to our ecosystems, to species diversity, and ultimately to human life itself. The FAO publication series, Forests and Climate Change in the Caribbean, over 4 periods, identifies the urgent need for strengthening the forestry sector of the region. It specifically indicated the need for strengthening forest management institutions to enhance their capabilities to effectively respond to climate change, to assess and share knowledge on the climate vulnerabilities of forest goods and services, that support rural livelihoods, as well as to strengthen technical expertise, methodologies, processes, and organizational capacity for resilient forests. However, official development assistance is very limited for the Caribbean forestry sector when compared to other environmental sectors, and even less so for capacity building. There is a greater focus on general biodiversity conservation and climate resilience. Finally, as a region, we cannot adequately focus on biological conservation and climate resilience if we do not have enough forestry and wildlife specialists and experts at the discussion table, as well as in the field gathering evidence. In conclusion, the OECS is committed to doubling its efforts in capacity building, recognizing that regional capacity in the forestry sector is not where it should be. Our strategic focuses are creating value for the environment, as well as building resilience to global, regional, and national environmental change through a harmonized approach. Through this approach, we aim to build our region's policy and institutional technical capacities to effectively manage our natural resources. Your cohort here at the University of Trinidad and Tobago represents our first line of human capacity in a critical and strategic response to build resilience in the environment and the impacts of climate change. You are being trained not just to serve your respective countries, let me emphasize that, not just to serve your respective countries, but to provide regional capacity. And I must say, as an aside, I was very heartened sitting out there when you all came in this morning, because instantly I could feel the vibes. You all are a group that has really gelled together. The camaraderie, the togetherness is evident. The enthusiasm is evident. And I was saying to one of your colleagues who are sitting next to, that we mentioned to the president of UTT that our intention is by the time you graduate, we want you all to become the nucleus of an OECS association of forestry experts. And once you do, you already are as comrades in study, right? But now we want you to formalize this thing, because you then, in that capacity, can become the experts for the entire region. If you specialize in one area and you're from Grenada and St. Lucia needs help, we can have you seconded to St. Lucia for a period of time to provide the services. We are tired of seeing foreigners coming to the region, providing technical expertise, being consultants. When the indigenous knowledge matters, the expertise has to be developed locally. So we have great visions of what you all, and especially the way you all have gelled as a group, that is vitally important for the future. We want to, too often, in recognizing such initiatives, in recognizing those who have made such initiatives possible, the expression of thanks is unfortunately weighted by the scale of the resources provided, rather than taking into account the impact of the initiative. You know, we tend to give effusive thanks to somebody who gave us $5 million for a project, but somebody who gave $50,000, well, thank you, but bye-bye. The important thing here is not the size of the contribution, it is the impact of the contribution. And that is why, in acknowledging the European Union, the depth of our gratitude should be measured not simply to the extent of the funding provided for this initiative, but for the incalculable impact that it will have on our ability to secure our future. Our forests are irreplaceable, and so it is not just what you have enabled, but also the potential loss that you have prevented by training you all and by supporting the forestry sector. It is equal measure we express our sincere thanks to the University of Trinidad and Tobago for the training and the capacity building that it has facilitated. I trust that given the weight of responsibilities attendant on your successful training, you will apply hands, minds, and hearts to this opportunity to serve your countries and our region. And let me say, in discussions with the President and his team earlier this week, we did indicate our desire to sign a wide-ranging memorandum of agreement with the UTT that will cover more than just forestry. It's interesting that ECIAF is part of that ecosystem in the UTT, because ECIAF's reputation in the Eastern Caribbean is legendary. And we want to have a broad partnership with the UTT that will see us not just engaging them to do training, but together shaping proposals that will meet the needs of the OECS in environment and a range of areas that they offer training in. So thank you very much, and we look forward to your graduating with high honors and the application of your knowledge with great attention. Thank you.
I wanted to point out that ECIAF, which was known as, the Director General said legendary, we intend to make it even more legendary. Now, I'm saying this despite the fact that UTT is the National University of Trinidad and Tobago. We see the Caribbean as part of Trinidad and Tobago also. We all together, this idea of 1 minus 10 gives 0 doesn't work again. We see that the only way we can survive is together. As the Director General indicated, that all of these factors with regard to forestry, environmental, all these sort of things are linked. And therefore, we are part of the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, UTT also, its duty is not only the Trinidad and Tobago, but the Caribbean itself. And this is something we are doing. And they're not mutually exclusive, helping to develop Trinidad and Tobago and helping to develop the region. It's symbiotic. So that is something I wanted to make very clear. So we are happy to have you, and as I told the Director General, that we're looking forward to deepening this relationship and enhancing it. Now, you mentioned all the various points of the climate and these sort of things, and I want to put on the table or point out that UTT is a different kind of university. So, for instance, whilst we have ECIAF, or BAFT as we call it now, we have the maritime faculty as such, where we're involved in a lot of programs in terms of environmental issues with the EU and the International Labour Organization and the International Maritime University. And Trinidad and Tobago is a site for one of the 5 centers of excellence set up by the UN in terms of maritime. So we are here to look at all the other issues, and in fact, presently we have programs that are looking at greening the shipping fuel, and I know with looking at more and more sea transport, and therefore the fuel, etc., becomes important, its impact on the environment. So we are there to look at this integrated approach. Also, our staff here are looking at all this sort of greenhouse gas emissions in the environment, and we are doing the baseline studies for Trinidad and Tobago, the various ports and industries. And this, I think, forestry plays an important part in it also, because the forest helps to remove the carbon from the environment. So this is something that we look forward to. We want to suggest, as we indicated in discussions yesterday, that we expand the technology associated with agriculture and forestry, that we include more and more high-tech, or if you want to use that word, emerging technologies. So issues like drone for management, surveying of the forest, this is something we can look at, and we have a department that specializes in that. So then in terms of AI, AI is used a lot for trends. Can we predict trends? What trends are there from the past, present, and how we go forward in the future? So some of these things I think would be useful training for prospective and practicing foresters and people involved in agriculture to take the field forward. So I think this is exciting. If I carry on for much longer, then it gets less exciting, you get more sleepy. So I will try to finish now. The idea is to have this sort of training, and I want to encourage you and put on Professor Brijmohan. I think it'd be useful to have the students go to the various campuses for a visit to the Maritime campus, to the MME campus, and to the Spondylosis campus, where we look at maritime issues, all right, drone and technology, AI, etc., but San Fernando campus, and Point Lisas, where we're looking at gashouse emissions monitoring, etc., to give you an overall picture. University education is about learning, and learning comes from within. It should be driven from within, not forced upon you. And I think it'll be a useful experience for you, and even more pleasant to us if you visit these campuses. And whatever we can do, I don't know if it's in the budget, but we can help accommodate that, right? At least we can do it half, if not, we'll do it. But I think it's important that the students have a look at this campus and talk to staff members there. Actually go to the campuses and see the research being done, etc., is going to make an impact. So again, welcome to Trinidad and Tobago. I know you've been here some time. You all look happy, so it has been pleasant for you, right? We intend to keep it that way, and we look forward to, when you go back to your respective states, to invite me. Thank you.
I'm very grateful for this opportunity that after graduating in 1988, when some of you were not even around, I'm here to be able to come back to Trinidad to share this good opportunity where we see the funding from the European Union and the work of the OECS coming together to build capacity of the forestry departments and institutions in the OECS. I had become a little bit concerned because, like a forest, we were in what we call age classes. The last time we had students studying at ECIAF was about over 10 years ago. And with the forest and management of forests, it must be continued. You can't have these generational gaps. In the cohort of students that were there with me and graduated in 1988, I only think there are 2 who remain in forestry in Trinidad. All the others in the OECS have gone, either retired or gone on to other things. And I'm about that time, but I would stay in the environment for sure, in terms of working in the environment beyond leaving the government. So it's important that we see your opportunity, your time here, in terms of developing your capacity. And I know when I sat with the members of staff of the OECS, we really pushed this. Because in order to achieve the integrated land management process, we must know what we are managing. We must value what we have in terms of the environment. And we in the OECS tend to look at it on St. Vincent and the Grenadines from the ridge to the reef. Because everything you do at the ridge affects what happens in the reef. So the marine is correct, the terrestrial is connected to the marine, and it's a cycle. When in the 30-something years ago, when I graduated, we weren't talking about biodiversity. The only thing we probably knew was global warming. It's now climate change. But we must realize that that's the development of what we will learn in terms of our environment and the importance of us managing our environment. Because we now have biodiversity, which is important. I was trained as a forester and a wildlife biologist, but I've been managing people most of the time. And that's a challenge. And I've often said, we can leave the forest alone. The forest was designed to manage itself. What we have to do is manage what we do as human beings on this earth. And we see the result. We strive to achieve that 1.5, but because of what our practices, we're not achieving it, and we need to improve on that. And one of the things is to manage our forests much better. In the islands, we may say, oh, the forests are small, but they play a very important role in terms of island biodiversity and island ecosystem management. We're now in the point where we used to see the forests and people as 2 different. The forests would be there to protect, and the people want to use it and abuse it. So we'd have the tree cutters and the tree huggers. You now need to have the tree partners in terms of valuing what you have and how you can protect it for future generations. There's a saying that we're not giving the forest or the environment to the future generation. We're borrowing it from them. And we need to protect it for them. And when you borrow something, you value it. I know these days sometimes people have a lot of issues with their credit, but we're crediting and we imported. The forest will survive once we manage that credit we've been given in terms of the opportunity to make sure that our children and grandchildren can roam in the forest, breathe the fresh air, enjoy the sea breeze in terms of what is there that has been given to us. So it's important as you, as students, as you develop here, and it's been encouraged by the speakers before me, that you see yourself not only as islanders individual, but as a region working together. I've had friends in all the islands. Some of them have gone into politics, like Mr. Prosper in St. Lucia, and another gentleman in Grenada. He was in agriculture, but Prosper was in forestry. And they continue to play that role in terms of the policy and management of the forest and the environment as a whole. So as students, we need to stick together and develop. You're going to be having friends throughout the region. I know most foresters in most of the region, but they're changing. And because we never had this link of the new generation, I have to form new relationships with these students, these new foresters in the islands. And one of the things also affected in the islands is the loss of capacity. I mentioned it before. Because we will not, as we sit, we see foresters retired, moving on, and there's no new ones coming in. So don't just stay with the University of Trinidad and Tobago studies, go beyond. Specialize in the different areas that you will be able to manage and work with your partners, and as Dr. Jules indicated, that we will be able to call someone from another island to come. Under our ILM project, our consultant is from Trinidad and Tobago. It was difficult to find someone again, but we found him in Trinidad and Tobago, and he did a very good work, and we want to continue with that work. So it's important that we manage our opportunities to work within the forest and within the environment. And as I said before, see the connection between the ridge and the reef. Get around to the other colleges, the other campuses of the UTT, and learn what they're doing, because it becomes a valuable and important part in the work that we do. Because also in terms of our region, because we're young islands. I didn't know that in 2005 we would discover a new species of lizard. And then from discovering that, we identified another species of iguana. And strange enough, that species of iguana is related to the iguana in St. Lucia. So you see the connectivity of the island biodiversity and island connection. So important that what we want to manage, we need to value what we're going to be managing. And the value comes from knowledge you gain here, and the experience you gain in terms of working in the field. When I joined forestry, someone said to me, "Oh, you're going to plant trees." I've planted trees for myself. But in terms of I've managed the environment for many persons. And that is one of the things that's being, as I say, stewards of the earth. I say we have the best job in the world, because we get to learn and we get to work in the environment. I know I'm kind of stuck in the office too much. But it's every time I go, there's a new opportunity to learn and to value the environment better and see how it plays a role in keeping my life. And it plays a role in keeping all of our lives together. But we must do it as partners of the environment. And I like to use the buzzword in terms of we went through sustainability, sustainable land management, but the integrated land management approach, which this project is about connecting everyone. The agriculturalists, the foresters, the business people, the lawyers. We need to work together to manage our environment for our future generations. So thank you very much.
It is a pleasure to be here representing my boss, the art executive director, Mr. Calvin James. I'm kind of glad because I get to be in a room with all of you. I am not, as was mentioned, trained specifically within the area of the environment, but it's a privilege to be able to be part of a project and in a room with students that are proponents of the environment and are on their way to be the change that we need to see and ensure sustainability of our small but mighty environment. As you stand on the cusp of embarking on your professional journey, being armed with your management and conservation of forests, parks, wildlife, and the environment diploma, it is essential to take time to reflect on the impact that your chosen field of study has on the Caribbean region and its commitments to the United Nations Convention to combat desertification. The Caribbean, with its diverse ecosystems and unique environmental challenges, faces the pressing issue of land degradation and desertification. Here, forestry emerges as a potential tool in combating these challenges. Sustainable forest management not only helps preserve biodiversity, but also mitigates soil erosion, maintains water quality, and sequesters carbon dioxide. thus contributing to the restoration and conservation of degraded lands. Your expertise in forestry will play a pivotal role in advancing the Caribbean's efforts to combat desertification and achieve the goals outlined by our Director General and in general under the United Nations Convention. Moreover, the EU OECS ILM project, this project that we're discussing today, has a phenomenal potential to ensure the region meets its commitments under the convention. The project represents a significant initiative aimed at promoting sustainable land management practices across the Eastern Caribbean. Through capacity building, technical assistance, and policy support, the project facilitates the implementation of integrated approaches to land management, which, of course, as we said over and over, includes forestry, but not to forget areas of agriculture and conservation. By enhancing institutional capacities and fostering collaboration among the stakeholders, the project empowers the region to address land degradation effectively and build resilience to climate change, thereby aligning with the goals of the UNCCD. As young minds from the OECS, formally trained in key aspects of land management, you represent an investment in the future sustainability and resilience of our region. As professionals being equipped with the necessary knowledge and skill, you will play a critical role in implementing sustainable land management practices, conserving natural resources, and addressing environmental challenges that threaten our very existence. Your expertise will not only contribute to the advancement of the Caribbean commitment to the UNCCD, but also pave the way for a prosperous future for our region. In conclusion, I would implore all of you to remember the profound responsibility that comes with your diploma. It is not just an expensive piece of paper, but something that would allow you to be stewards of the Caribbean's natural heritage, entrusted with the task of preserving and protecting our forests, parks, wildlife, and our general environment. Embracing this responsibility with passion, dedication, and commitment to excellence. Your contributions will be instrumental in shaping a more sustainable, resilient future for the Caribbean region and beyond. So best wishes on your journey ahead, and thank you for allowing me to address you.
Today, my job is to tell you about the project's WH. What, why, and how. First off, let me mention why we say GCCA. The ILM project was actually built out of the GCCA. So through the execution of the Global Climate Change Alliance project, gap analysis, various assessments, various lessons learned came to fruition, and that led to the development of the integrated landscape approaches and investments in sustainable land management in the OECS, known as the ILM project. Now, the ILM project, the OECS ILM project, is uniquely aligned to the European Union's program called Landscapes for Our Future. The program's main objective, in its simplest form, is to optimize the contribution of land to food security and climate resilience. Yes, there's a lot of things there. And in doing so, it will target 5 of the Sustainable Development Goals. So because we were uniquely aligned to that program, the EU granted us funding in 5 million. The duration of the project is 5 years for implementation and then 2 years of monitoring, evaluation, and closing off. So yes, I said 5 million. So as you can see, the project started, or should I say, the grant was signed November 2020. Everybody knows what happened December 2020. So because of that, the EU then came back and offered 400,000 in support of St. Vincent. So that is why St. Vincent and the Grenadines has 2 more extra students than the other OECS islands. They made the request to use part of their funds for that. Now, the OECS ILM project, because we're funded part of the EU program, Landscapes for Our Future, is one of 23 global projects. So as you can see, There is Latin America, the Caribbean, Africa, and the Pacific. But in the OECS, the specific why or objective for the project, so I have to read the technical jargon, to strengthen OECS economic, social, and environmental resilience to the impacts of climate change and other hazards through the implementation of integrated landscape management, sustainable land management, integrated watershed management approaches, a lot of techniques. But at its core, and in all honesty, we need to renew our current practices if we're going to survive. We're not badly off compared to other global regions, but for us to survive as a region, our smallness, our limited population, limited land mass, we have to renew to survive. So just remember that ILM is about renewing to survive. But we need partners to do that. Again, we're a small island. So pay attention to the three logos. C4, Center for International Forestry Research. They are a critical partner for the EU in terms of landscapes for our future. Their focus is on knowledge capture. What are some of the best practices in managing the ILM projects globally? So because they're EU partners, they will be our partners too. Partnership, PISLM, Partnership Initiative on Sustainable Land Management, you already heard from. Then there is the Caribbean Urban Forum, or CUF. CUF is in essence a think tank that is encompassed in an annual conference that brings together professional land managers, land use planners, policymakers to discuss policy, innovations, and things for the region. How are we going to do this project? The OECS ILM has 3 strategic outputs or deliverables. First one, as you can see, we have 11 flags representing the 11 member states of the OECS, including the 2 French territories. So because the French territories are considered external territories of the EU, they were not included in this project. So we're targeting 9 specific English-speaking OECS members. So output 1, we must have actual on-the-ground physical adaptive interventions in 9 of our member states to demonstrate ILM approaches. Strategic output 2, remember the logos? Land governance and coordination. We have to increase awareness and participation of our member state at these global environmental agreements. Those are where the decisions and fundings are being made. And if we don't have representation there, we are left out. Output 3, enhanced capacities, building capacity, training, strengthening the institutional structure in each OECS member state to sustain the intervention and provide for environmental management. So I will give you 3 examples because we have 3 strategic outputs on physical adaptive interventions. Beginning with, anybody have a drum roll? Drum roll. Thank you. Anguilla. So, Mr. Richardson, Anguilla, small coral limestone island with an even smaller landmass and small population. The capital is the valley, of course. Commercial, retail, everything is housed in the capital. But the challenges in Anguilla, in the capital is where all the lands for agriculture production is contained and managed by government. So we have competing issues. So through an integrated approach, a series of consultation with different sectors, the designs or the interventions for Anguilla include 1, a biofiltration system, specifically because in the valley, we have issues of stormwater management or floodwater management issues. So biofiltration will tackle a filtration of the water that flows into a sediment pond, and then because, I don't want to say Anguilla is generally dry, but You know, we don't get as much rain as some of us in the Windward Islands. I don't want to say it that harsh, but yes. So we have the detention pond. We want to decrease sedimentation, as well as increase the capacity and use for the pond water. So through biofiltration system, we're using native tree species. Their root systems, as they grow, will filter some of the water. Then we wouldn't have as much sedimentation in the pond. Once the pond reaches a certain capacity, we'll be installing, I guess, pumps, renewable and supplied, or should I say supported by renewable energy, to pump the water into what we call efflorescent tanks, two big storage tanks, so to speak. They will be egg-shaped or dome-shaped. And then we will attach irrigation supplies to that to supply the surrounding farmlands in the area. In addition to that, we also have to develop the local area plan and part implementation for the valley to guide the development. Then we're also looking at a good soils management policy. This was requested, and what they wanted, not just a development, but part implementation. So that involves training the farmers on various soil conservation techniques, because guess what? That is all Anguilla has. So food security is an issue, and they need to start cultivating better practices, renewing to survive. So that's some of the images, the designs that have been produced specifically for Anguilla. It was a bit of a process, but we got there. Drum roll for another example. Antigua and Barbuda, specifically Antigua. Lloyd, I will not call you Mr. Williams. People will think we're related, but we're not. The Body Ponds Watershed Conservation Area. As you can see here on the location map, it's part central, touching the tip of the south. Body Ponds Watershed was the second largest watershed in Antigua that used to serve many of the Caribbeans. So I'm from Antigua, so I can proudly say Antigua dry, very dry. So when we do get water, we need to harvest and conserve. But unfortunately, through the passage of time and, of course, bad land use practices, if you notice in the picture, you see something that looks like forest and then something that looks like grassland. It's not grassland. It's fever grass, a very invasive species. As it grows, it clumps the soil together, exposing the soil for soil erosion. So when the rain does come, all of the soil is nicely washed away. And then we still have cultural practices of slash and burn. You all know what that is. We burn to start agricultural crops. The fever grass has a particular chemical, or oil I should say, that makes it highly flammable. So even if you start a fire here, if the ember lands over there on the fever grass, that whole hill is gone. So over time and through research, trial and error, and through various projects, we learned that terracing and reforestation is the way to help combat that area. So for Antigua and Barbuda, we are installing 6 slope terraces on Byam Hill. You should know that, anyway. Yes, on Byam Hill. That is a very exorbitant cost because you're dealing uphill and you have to look at slope stabilization, etc., etc. But in addition to supporting the forestry unit to establish those slope terraces, we want to help them generate revenue, not only for the area, but for the unit. And they've requested the construction of a visitor interpretation center that will not only make it easier for them to maintain the site, because it will act as a storage, conference, training facility, but also as an evacuation shelter. Because of where it's located, the indigenous Rastafarian tribe, Nyabingi and One Love, are located in that area, so to provide shelter during times of storm. And finally, drum roll, who wants to guess the next island I'm going to? Going. Well done. Grenada. Now, Grenada, known as the Spice Isle of the Caribbean, agricultural production was one of the main economic contributors. However, following 2004, 2005, and a few other climatic disasters, there was widespread loss of tree crops and also loss of soil fertility due to soil erosion. So because of that, through consultations again with key sectors, the goal is to, how should I put this? Rehabilitate underutilized croplands, get them back to where they were and even better. So there are two sites that were highlighted, Grand Bras and, correct me, Grand Bacole estates. Those are government-owned agricultural farming estates. Not fully functional to their capacity, but the ILM, the OECS ILM intervention is specifically targeting the Grand Bras estate, and I'll tell you why. First and foremost, the Grand Bras estate is where a lot of the government work is being done. Emphasis is going there to try and get it back up and running. The Grand Bacole estate is part of the World Bank's Land Bank project, where they would like to issue land to farmers. But because we're renewing our practices to survive, before the lease agreements for these farmlands can be signed off on, we need to ensure that the farmers are trained in sustainable land management, in climate smart agricultural practices. But where are we going to train them? We don't have the adequate training facility. So this is why the OECS ILM project for Grand Bras Estate will be constructing the agricultural estate training center and office to provide storage, a utility room, everything at the Grand Bras Estate, conference facilities, etc. So we train them and send them out. Also, as part of the Grand Bras Estate, we'll be looking at instilling soil demonstration or soil conservation demonstration plots. As part of the training, you can actually see how you go about soil conservation at the Grand Bras Estate. Then, because it's a farming estate that we're trying to revitalize, the goal is to develop a farm estate management plan that factors in key crops, timing, schedule, and I guess you could say the amount to be produced for that estate. In addition to that, we're also looking at draining, procuring, and installing drainage and irrigation supplies to the estate. So Grand Bras, in essence, will become a model estate for agricultural production, and the hope is that it will be replicated throughout Grenada. That is actually the design of the building. It's actually 2-story. So all that I said was very quick and simple, but as you can see, it's a very long process, a back and forth, a negotiation. In some member states like Grenada, it has to go to cabinet before we can even say yes. But as you can see, the circle right there, that is exactly where we are. We've received final designs for almost all the member states, and we've gotten, I think, 6 or 7 approval, high-level approval to then proceed. So this is where we are. Don't worry with the SCR one. That's how we term them, service contracts. Anguilla, Dominica, and Grenada, we're already at the procurement stage where we'll be procuring construction workers, buying the supplies and the equipment to install. So it's a process because we're being funded by the EU. We have to follow their procurement guidelines. We can't just say, you know what, let me give you the contract. You look like you know what you're doing. No, we have to follow their guidelines. Antigua and Barbuda and St. Kitts Nevis, they're looking at biodiversity and ecosystem restoration, also at procurement phase. We're now in the process of selecting bids for the construction works. St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the final designs were recently submitted, so they're now in the approval stage. Hopefully, because Fitz felt empowered here, he can get it pushed through faster, no pressure. Montserrat and the Virgin Islands, they're looking at agriculture planning and development, and we're now about to go into, we've just received final approval, I think 2 weeks ago, so we're now going to go into the procurement advertising stage. So that is what Strategic Output 1 deliverable looks like. Strategic Output 2, looking at governance, land governance and coordination, increased awareness and participation. Remember I said remember those logos. So the OECS has what we call Council of Ministers of Environmental Sustainability. We technically bring them, lock them into a room and start talking about the environmental issues and challenge and the procedure in which, or the path in which we're going to address some of the challenges faced. But of course you need funding, because I'm sure if we do it on virtual, you will see 10 people log on, and before half an hour has passed, you slowly see 5. So we have to have them together in one room where we can discuss and thrash out these issues. So we support that for the ministers to be present. And then we have the CUF, the Caribbean Urban Forum. Again, I said it's the think tank for the region in terms of land use management innovations. We supported for June 2022, and believe it or not, it was at that meeting that building capacity in forestry emerged. Like, it was the biggest or largest demand and a discussed topic. 2025, we've been approached to have it in St. Lucia. We will also have to support that. PISLM, as Ms. Jackson would have spoken about, they look at the pre-COP negotiation. So we need to present a united front as a region. So before we go into the global stage, we need to coordinate as a region to ensure we have the strategy correct, the synergies, what are we going to cover, etc. And we support the PISLM in hosting those meetings, whether or not, as well as if you need an extra participant to attend the UNCCD meeting. So for example, the UNCCD tends to provide support for one person, one expert from each island. But there are cases where some of the issues, the variety of issues being covered, you need more than one expert. And this is where we come in to support. Finally, remember C4, the knowledge management of the EU ILM project, or program I should say. They recently held an ILM Global Summit where they wanted to capture how each participating global region was doing. I had the fortunate privilege of attending, and I must say I came back with renewed hope, because I thought we were badly off, but we're not. There are some regions that they've already entered the era of extinction. So parts of the Pacific, the land is so far degraded that they cannot get food from the land. So they're now evacuating into other tribal territories, which is causing war, etc., etc. We haven't reached that yet. I don't pray we get there. I don't think we can have that. So that's it for strategic output 2 in terms of how the project is being managed. Strategic output 3, yes, I know that's an old photo. We're looking at enhanced capacities. So today I'm hoping that we will get a new photo with everybody. This particular training is just one of many. As I said before, for example, in Anguilla, we also have to look at training farmers, etc. But then enhanced capacity doesn't only feature actors, but it also looks at the institutions themselves. How can we build and strengthen? We have to develop policies, legislation. For example, Antigua, the forestry legislation is from 1941. Everybody here can pay the fine by now. So we're looking to draft the legislation for Antigua and Barbuda and St. Lucia. We're looking at riparian policies for St. Lucia, integrated watershed management plans for St. Vincent and St. Lucia, and all of these things will build the capacity to sustain the intervention, the works. So they say at the end of a presentation, you're supposed to put up an image that is tranquil enough to make your audience retain what was said. So that's my water image. Thank you for listening. It's actually the Grand Bras. It's by the Grand Bras Estate. When you're going, the river there, I can't remember the name of the river, but yes, that's it. So thank you very much, and thank you for listening.